Welcome to another video. Today we'll be looking at ICT, more specifically paper 1 and paper 2. This is the ultimate guide in my opinion, and just to remind you, this is ICT for Pearson Edexcel iGCSE or International GCSE. But anyway, let's get on with the video. So first of all, important details for paper 1, beginning with the code for this paper. So in ICT, of course, there's paper 1 and paper 2, and the first paper is given the code of 4IT1/01. You must know that, this is what my paper is called, so that when you get the examination paper, you can always check that, okay, I've got the right paper. Mistakes can always happen in the exam hall, you never know. Okay, so this is the code for paper 1 for ICT. Then the second thing is that it's out of 100 marks. So the first paper is for 100 marks. Third thing, this constitutes for 50% of the entire ICT iGCSE. So paper 1, 50%, and of course the other 50% is paper 2. We'll come to that later. Number 4, it's 1.5 hours long, so 1 hour and 30 minutes long paper. Lastly, it is a written paper, so out of the two papers, this is the written one. So first of all, paper 1, let's look more deeply into paper 1. Firstly, the syllabus for paper 1. In total, there are usually 5 to 7 questions in total in the entire paper, but these are broken down into many parts, which is why, of course, it's a long paper for 100 marks. Now, let's look at the syllabus. So, number 1, the first topic is digital devices, then connectivity, operating online goods and services. These 4 topics are the entire syllabus for paper 1. I'll put the Amazon link for the textbook in the description down below. So the textbook is very useful because all of these topics are covered in a great detail. So if there's any textbook you need to pass ICT, it is the one which I will link in the description, which is the iGCSE one. And the link to the full syllabus or the full specification is also in the description as well. So you can go through it, and you must go through it as an iGCSE student. Okay, so this is a summarized syllabus for paper 1. These are the main 4 topics that come. Okay, moving on, let's look at some of the types of questions in paper 1. So first of all, here are multiple choice questions. Multiple choice questions come not that much throughout the entire paper, but they are definitely there. You will definitely come across around 4 or 5 multiple choice questions in paper 1, and you can see there's always this instruction which is given in the beginning, which you can see I've put over here, which says some questions must be answered with a cross in a box. So multiple choice questions have to be answered by crossing the box, and if you change your mind about an answer, put a line through the box as it shows over there, and then mark your new answer with a cross. Okay, so this is an example of a multiple choice question. You can see here which one of these digital communication types has the greatest bandwidth, and then there are several options to choose from, and it's for 1 mark. Always multiple choice questions are for 1 mark only. Next, moving on, another type of question, or a few other types of questions, are example questions and state questions. Okay, so the first picture over here that I've put is an example question where they ask you to give an example. As you can see, smart speakers use embedded microprocessors. Give one other example of a device that uses an embedded microprocessor. So they're asking you for an example, and of course you have to write down what that example is. It has to be correct, of course, but you just have to write it down. You don't have to explain it or do anything else. You can even see it's for 1 mark. So these are simple questions where you just have to state the answer. And moving on from that, there are some state questions in which you just have to state. You don't have to give an example of anything. As you can see, the second picture over here, so a smartphone can be used to play games, make calls, and take photographs. State the term used to describe this type of device. So the answer over here, for example, would be multifunctional device for this question. So you will just state that. You don't have to describe, explain. So these 2 types of questions are very similar, which is why I grouped them together. They're for 1 mark each, and you just have to state or give an example in just 1 or 2, 3 words. And no need for explanations, descriptions, or analysis or anything of the sort. That's where some students make mistakes. For 1 mark questions, they ramble on and on when you don't need to. They sometimes miss out that this is just a 1 mark question, and they don't read the instructions where it just says, state. Don't ever try to elaborate in small questions like this, because it's going to waste your time, and then you won't have time for the real questions which actually matter, which are for 4, 5, 6 marks. Okay, moving on. So some more types of questions in paper 1 are diagram questions. Now, diagram questions you have to be very particular and careful about. So as you can see here, draw a diagram to show how a Wi-Fi router can be used with a gateway to provide a smart speaker with an internet connection. Label each component of your diagram. So of course you are required to draw a diagram which has labels on it. You need to know how to label it and how to show it in an appropriate way in which the examiner understands. And also, by the way, most of these diagrams are found in the textbook, which I mentioned earlier, which is the iGCSE ICT textbook, which you should have and you should really be very thorough with. So these are diagram questions, are usually for more marks. As you can see, 4 marks for this one. Sometimes it's even more, 7 marks if it's like a bigger diagram or maybe multiple diagrams which you have to draw within one question. Okay, so these are diagram questions, and moving on, there are construct questions. So these are actually really rare. They don't usually appear in ICT papers, but they can come up, so you need to know about them because most students make mistakes in these ones. So why is it called construct question? Because you have to construct an expression. So you know how in mathematics there are expressions and equations, so the same way in ICT they might ask you to construct an expression, as it says in the picture there. Construct an expression to show how many bits are in 50 GIB. So that's a very tricky question, so you need to know your formula and everything properly, how many bits there are in a byte. How many bits are there in a byte, everyone? There are 8 bits in a byte. Okay, that's just some information for you there, but you should know everything about bits, terabytes, megabytes, GIB, difference between GIB and GB. Moving on, complete the table questions. Right below you can see I've given an example of a complete the table question. So you're given the network type, which is PAN, and then you have to give an example of that network type, and then below that, just below that, you can see they've given the example, which is the internet, and then you have to state the network type. So that would be WAN, or wide area network. Okay, so these are some more types of questions. Then we have identify questions, and these are very varied, so they can be of more marks or less marks. It depends what the question type is. So as you can see, the D1 on the left hand side says identify the device that uses solid state storage. So there's actually, I couldn't put the whole screenshot in here, but there was a long list of pictures, and of course you have to identify the device that uses solid state storage. So actually, conveniently, the device is the first one, which is the USB, because it uses flash memory, which is also solid state storage. So that's one type of identify question. Then the one on the right, J, which shows us a screenshot of an email, and now it's for 3 marks, as you can see as well, and now they want you to identify 3 items from this screenshot of the email that may cause Laura to believe this is an attempt at fraud. So you have to correctly identify the features of this email that could possibly mean this is a fraud email. So these are the different types of identify questions. Of course, in order to fully know every single type of question that comes, you need to do lots of past papers, and then you get the hang of it, Then we come to describe, explain, and list questions, and these are some of the most common, which feature a lot throughout the entirety of paper 1. Okay, so for example, let's look at a describe question, the first one here. Describe how tethering could be used to give the smart speaker access to the internet. So it's for 2 marks. It says describe, so you have to use your brain and understand that even though you have to describe how it works, you don't have to go into too much detail. It should be roughly around 2 to 3 sentences long maximum, or maybe even just 2 sentences long. You have to be careful. You have to see, okay, it's a describe question, I have to describe, but it's for 2 marks, so I don't have to describe too much. It's a small explanation. Then we move on to explain questions. So let's read it. One benefit to users of streaming music rather than downloading it is reduced cost. Explain one other benefit to users of streaming music rather than downloading it. So you have to pay attention in these type of questions because it said explain one other benefit. So don't try to explain lots of benefits and think you'll get marks for it. It clearly says one other benefit. So just choose one benefit which you think is suitable for this answer and then explain it in appropriate detail, which is enough for 2 marks. Moving on, last one, list question. The online store can be accessed from any internet connected device. List 2 features of a smartphone that make it suitable for online shopping when traveling. 2 features. You can see they've made it bold as well for your benefit. So you have to list 2 features. Now list is fairly simple. You just have to list it, write it down, same like the state question, except here it says 2 features. So you just write down the 2 features and then you get 2 marks. No explanation, nothing like that. Okay, so these are some type of questions, and then finally we come to the bigger long answer questions, which are analysis questions and justification questions. questions, and these you really have to pay attention on, because as you can see, they're for 8 marks each, sometimes even more, 9 marks maybe, or less, 7 marks, etc. It varies. Okay, so you can see here, let's read the examples. The airline stores transactional data about customer purchases. Customers who fly are offered rewards by the airline, and other companies analyze the use of transactional data by the airline. So over here, they're asking you to analyze the use of transactional data. So this is where you really have to go into detail and depth and totally talk about the topic in a way that is analytical, and you have to put in a lot of relevant points into your answer. And you can look at mark schemes as well to get a better understanding of what kind of points they want you to write in the answer. And you can even check exemplar answers. So by the way, just to remind everyone, I have my ICT exemplar answers online available for sale on ko-fi.com, and the link is in the description. So you can check out my very own exemplar answers for my own iGCSE exam, which I gave, and alhamdulillah I got an A star. So you can check my exemplar answers. They're available for sale and they can be of a lot of use to you. Okay, then the second question, the athletics organization asks athletes to provide a detailed personal profile with this statement: having more data about our members helps us to help you. Justify the organization's decision to gather this personal information from athletes. So this is all about privacy, personal information, and the rights of online users. And you have to be well versed in all the topics of ICT to be able to write such long answer questions. Okay, so anyway, these are some examples. There are lots more online in past papers. Of course, once again, I'm going to say it again, you have to keep practicing past papers in order to get better at this sort of thing, to get better at answering these type of questions as well. Okay, so that was paper 1. That's all I think is relevant for you to know about paper 1. Now moving on, let's look at paper 2. Okay, so paper 2 is the tricky one. Like for ICT, paper 2 is where you really have to focus on, because that's where most students lose their marks. It's all about timing and knowing everything really, really well. But anyway, first of all, let's look at the code, which is 4IT1/02 or 02. Then of course it is for 100 marks as well, same as paper 1. It also makes up for 50% of the ICT iGCSE. So paper 1 is 50%, paper 2 is 50%. So there's an even distribution. So it's not like one paper is more important than the other. What I meant was paper 2 is definitely more trickier to get better marks in. So you have to sort of practice it just as much as paper 1, or even more sometimes. Okay, so that's one thing. Then moving on, it's 3 hours long, so it's a very long paper. 3 hours is a lot of time, but actually most students fall short even when they have 3 hours, because the paper is such. But of course, if you've been doing a lot of practice and you have been timing yourself for 3 hours consistently and doing this paper on your own, then you won't find it hard to keep up and finish it in time. Okay, then lastly, the most important thing is that it's a practical paper. It's not a written paper. You don't get a written sheet of paper to write your answers on. Nothing like that. Of course, you do get an exam paper, but it's practical. You have to do everything on a computer, on a laptop, in the examination hall. Okay, and we'll look at that in more detail right now. First of all, what's the syllabus for paper 2? Just 2 topics. The first one is applying information and communication technology. So the application of all of the ICT that we might have learned in the previous few lessons, and then software skills. So software skills encompasses a lot. Word processing, spreadsheet, logo design, which comes under graphic design, of course, and database. And the link to the full syllabus, of course, as always, is in the description. So check that out as well if you don't have it downloaded already. Moving on, let's look at the first thing which is important for you to register for paper 2. You always get a scenario like this example over here. Every paper 2 has a scenario which they give you. So over here in this one, this is from the sample assessment material. This is about Sharma Rest Easy Hotels, which is a hotel brand, and it owns hotels all around the world, as it says. And then Jayesh Sharma is owner of the company. And then you can see they give you lots of details. They always give you the address, the telephone, the website, the email, and then they mention the house style of the business. If you have been learning ICT, you will definitely know what house style is. It's like the default style or the business standard for all their documents and things like that. I won't go into too much detail, but as you can see, they've given details about the house style, which you will eventually have to use later on in the paper. So whenever you start paper 2, you should make a point to read the scenario carefully so that you know what you're going to be working with. Okay, fine, it's going to be about hotels. This is the address, telephone, everything is given here. Okay, the house style is mentioned. You have to make a mental note of that. You don't have to exactly remember everything by heart, because of course you can go back to it, but you have to make a mental note that, okay, this is all that is given to me. So if in a future question it says use the house style, don't get confused, because some people just skim over this data, and then later on when it says use the house style of the business, they'll be like, what house style? Because they haven't read this. So that's what I mean. Okay, so they always give a scenario. Then there are 2 sections, so section A and section B. Let's look at section A first. Section A, you're advised to spend 90 minutes on it. That's what it says on the paper as well, so you should spend 90 minutes on section A. Let's look at some questions now. Okay, so as you can see, task A2A. So this is a sample question for a spreadsheet. So task A over here is concerned with spreadsheet. Now, it's not always like that. It's not always that task A is a spreadsheet question. It always changes around. Okay, but here, task A is a spreadsheet question. You can see they're asking you to enter a formula in cell F32 to calculate the average daily room rate. Then you can see they want you to calculate the daily income for each hotel, and then eventually save the spreadsheet as task A2 and do not print at this stage. So this is the type of question that comes. You will probably have a good teacher who will be telling you how to go through these steps, and also I won't tell you how to do these things, but some essential things I want to point out is that there are lots of sub questions within these questions, and you have to pay really close attention to each of them. As you can see, one is for 2 marks, the other is for 4 marks. So you don't want to be losing marks here and there, because in the end it totals into like, oh my god, 15 marks lost because I made small mistakes here and there and I didn't read questions properly. So you have to be very precise in reading each and every single word of the question, because if you don't, you make silly mistakes, or you miss out, oh, it said 80% of the rooms and I did something else, or it said total daily income and you did the average daily income. So you have to be really precise. And another thing, you have to be really quick as well. So precise and quick. So that's something you master only after some time, which is why practice is so important, as I keep saying. And then another thing I want to point out here is the saving bit. So you have to be very careful about saving these files. If you don't save them properly, in the end of the exam, you will be totally confused. Which file do I have to print because you didn't name it properly? And also sometimes you might save something and then you might edit it again and then forget to save it and lose that thing. So you have to be really, really vigilant about saving. Command S or Control S has to be your best friend. And if you don't know what Control S is or Command S, it's the save button. You should know that shortcut. Then another thing, do not print at this stage, it says, which is important. You don't have to print at every stage. You have to always print at the end of the exam. Okay, at the end of the exam, you have to print out all of your files, because of course that's how you submit it to the examiners. You don't send the actual files to the examiners. You print out all of your work in the way that it's instructed in the paper. It will all be instructed in the paper, and your teacher will go through with this as well with you, and then in the end you have to print everything and it gets stapled and gets sent to the examiners. Okay, so this is a spreadsheet question. Then in section A, there are also graphic design questions, such as over here you can see create the logo. The logo must be fit for purpose. In the end, once again, save the logo as SREH logo. Insert a copy of the logo into a certain document which you might have created before. As you can see, it's called task A4. And then this is a presentation question. So presentation also comes in section A. Sometimes it might not come. It depends, okay? There's no rigid format to this. Presentation, I find presentation to be the easiest. So PowerPoint is usually, I find it the easiest of all of them. And also logo making is not that hard. But anyway, here they're asking you to create a slide master, and then they want you to have certain things in the master slide. As I said, use the house style described in page 3. So here you're lucky because they said described in page 3. Sometimes they won't mention that, so you'll be confused, but you get what I mean. Okay, so this is a presentation question. I'm not going into too much detail into all of this because that's not really my area right now. Okay, so section B, that was section A. Now we come to section B, which also you have to spend 90 minutes on. So 90 minutes for section A, 90 minutes for section B. In total, that makes up 3 hours. And in section B, you have some different sort of questions, usually more database questions. As you can see, this is a database question. Now, why did I pick this question is because it's a query question of requesting a list of customers who have doctor as a title, as you can see. Now, query questions are some of the most reoccurring questions. They always come in the paper, query questions. So you have to be very good at creating queries in the database. So we used Microsoft Access. I don't know if everyone uses that in the examination, but I think that is what is used. Microsoft Access is used. But creating queries in that, you have to really know how to do it because it's very tricky and a lot of mistakes can be made, and sometimes unknown errors come up and you're like, oh no, why is this error occurring? And you might not know and you can't do anything about it. That's why I chose a query question, just to signify its importance. Okay, then aside from database, there's also word processing. Okay, word processing sometimes might be in section A and not section B, but in the sample assessment material, it was in section B. And sometimes it might be in both. So word processing might be in both section A and B. Okay, so as I said, there's no rigid format to this. Over here, basically what they want you to do in the word processing document, which is obviously Microsoft Word, is to answer these questions, which is, for example, like the third one, explain why it is preferable to split the information into separate tables rather than storing all the information in one table. So towards the end of the paper, you usually get these kind of questions where they actually want you to answer these questions and type your answers instead of doing something actually practical. So these are some type of questions that come in section B. Then of course there's some more type of word processing questions, like this is mail merge. This is a mail merge question. So you have to edit the document and insert your logo, insert today's date, insert the name and role of the sender, enough space for signature, and basically what they want you to do is merge the Word document with the database that you probably had before. So this is another very important thing. Mail merge is very important to know in regards to word processing. Then we have some more similar questions where they're asking you to state the technique you used, the formatting technique you've used before, and how it improved the document. This is all done in Word, Microsoft Word as well, and these are all explanatory questions, not exactly practical. And then this is one of the last questions that comes in the exam. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't, but it's always at the end. As you can see why it's always at the end, because it's saying display the contents of the folder where you save the files produced in this examination, which is why I kept saying it's important to name the files properly and put it in the proper folders, and you have to make sure all the file names are readable as it says here. And then what they're asking you to do, or what they're going to ask you to do, is to take a screenshot of the display. So these are the types of questions that show up in section B of paper 2, and in total I would say paper 2 is the harder one. That's what I feel, and that's what most students find harder as well, because it's practical, there's very less margin for error, and even though the time is 3 hours, it mostly falls short because sometimes you have to create websites as well. I couldn't find a question for that in enough time, so I wasn't able to put it, but sometimes you have to create websites using the web software, but usually it's a very small thing they ask you to do. But that was it, and thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share, and if you've not already subscribed, then make sure to subscribe. More videos like this will come up soon. My ultimate guide is over. However, this ultimate guide series has finally come to an end, and I hope you enjoyed all the previous ones and found them useful. I have ones on maths, literature, accounting, and English, so you have to check them out if you haven't seen them already. That's it for now. See you in the next one.